come a long way in the past 7 or 8 years. So I'm pretty comfortable.
May I ask, just out of curiosity, how long have you been with PCI?
Well, that's a long story because we initially started with the city of Grand Rapids doing electrical inspections for us, and we had staff for the rest of the positions. And then PCI came on board, I believe it was 6 years ago, to help fill in an electrical because the city of Grand Rapids fees were a little bit too high. There was too much overhead built in on the total cost accounting, and the charges were really getting up there. So then we switched to PCI for electrical. And then as staff retired, we started saying, well, maybe we should outsource all of these functions. And we went through with the commission at that time, and here's the back. So it's been a process over the years of building towards them being able to provide all of our inspections.
Commissioners, any other questions on PCI history, go forward, results? All right, I think we've covered that one. Also on the consent agenda is expenditures in the amount of $1.032 million. Are there any questions? Thank you, Frank. Any questions on the bills? Going once, going twice? It's good. Mike. Next on the list, the resolution 20-563, City of Walker, Precinct 6, permanent relocation. Mike, thank you.
There you go, Sarah. Now you can talk about your precinct.
So we are.
That'll be really loud. Too loud.
Try it now. I had mine on.
Oh, that could have been, yep. Oh, there he goes. It's his, yep. Yeah. So do you want me to talk about it?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So Precinct 6, it was at Walker Meadows Retirement Center. We almost didn't use it in March, but we got through that. So of course, due to COVID, we needed to move it, but it was, in a way, the perfect storm because the room was way too small. Also being in a nursing home, the parking is also way too small and limited. So I reached out to Mount Olive Church, and after their board did the approval and did the contract with their attorneys, we finally got a contract with them. So we will be in the Mount Olive Education Building, and that is a permanent move. So we have our postcards for their IDs on order, and by the end of June, everybody that lives in Ward 2, Precinct 6, will get a new voter ID card. And the only other update I have is we're still pending. We have one precinct, Standale Reform, that right now is not too keen on August, but they have a board meeting tomorrow, and we've also reached out to Meyer Cleaning, and we may pay them to go in and clean the next morning and spray, and hopefully that will convince them to let us use the building for August and November. Okay?
Associated cost for the cleaning, do we know yet?
He said today he wants to go measure it, but he said probably 200.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I pay so like the churches, they get paid $150 to use their facility for an election day. Yeah. The city does all of the city precincts. We do not clean the churches because the city can't go in. We'd have to hire a cleaning company to go into them, but we've never had to.
We used to have a ton of these things. We're basically down to 2 districts now. One is our streetscape special assessment that's in the Standale area. We bill those with a due date of March 1st of each year. If they're not paid by June, so a couple months later, then we are allowed to certify those to the property tax roll, so that will be going into the summer property tax roll. The other one is the Riverbend Water Main District, which is down in South Walker. There are a couple of parcels that historically always end up on the tax roll. They just choose to pay that way. Unfortunately for them, that's more cost to them because there's late fees that get added on, but it's been pretty consistent over the last couple of years. So those are the 2 that would be on the roll.
Commissioners, any questions on the resolution certifying delinquent special assessment district rolls? Normal process, cool, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just a question on this, or a comment on the DDA one. That's not unusual to have that many every year on the DDA streetscape. That's kind of normal protocol for a lot of those businesses. They just rather have it on their tax bill versus paying a separate bill. So we always get that money back for the streetscape.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Next is the Downtown Development Authority. One of the, I guess, pluses out of the mayor's talking on a multiple times a week through the last couple of months. I had learned we're one of, if not the only city left with the mayor not sitting on the Downtown Development Authority. It was highly encouraged by other mayors to make sure that that was rectified, and spoke with Darrell Frank on this. So the resolution tonight is on that, is appointing the mayor's office to the Downtown Development Authority, just as the city manager sits on that as well. So I'll open that up for any questions.
The city manager will continue to sit on that as well, too?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And we're within our, by state statute, it's between 8 and 12. And actually, if you look in the state statute governing the tax increment finance authorities, it states between 8 and 12 members. It states the chief executive officer, also as the mayor of the city, is supposed to be on that piece. So this is probably an oversight from many, many years ago, maybe decades ago, that we're just writing. So.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are the other members aware that this is going to be happening?
No, because the June meeting, I believe, was canceled, or May meeting was canceled. May meeting was canceled because of COVID. So we do have a June meeting on the 16th. That meeting will take place in person at the fire station. So do they know yet? Probably give them a heads up, absolutely. Yep. Good question. Anything else on that? All right. We have 15 minutes if we want to hit. We'll start with, did our clerk cover all of her comments?
I'm good.
You're
Nothing,
Thank
thanks.
you. I'll turn to the managers. Mr. Wash, we'll start with you.
CDD's back full function today. We started off with a staff meeting just to get everyone back in one room. I think when you have staff working from home, we probably all found that works for a while, but then you miss some of the communication from being in the office together. So we tried to get back off on the right foot there. 2 items, there are 2 site plan reviews on planning commission Wednesday night. So you should have access to that via the website. One's a final area site plan for Culver, the Standale, the other one's for a new business, the specialty glass, which would be good industrial use, from Smart Wilson. And then we'll also look at the distribution draft for the master plan. So I'm going through that and redlining, keeping Darrell and the mayor and the planning commission chair in line, because I don't expect you folks to go through 400+ pages. That's really staff's responsibility to do that. But we'll look at the distribution draft on Wednesday night at planning commission, and if they are okay, subject to some amendments, it will come to you folks on June 22nd for review. This is by no means the final draft of the master plan. This is something that's required by statute to do what's called distribution to a whole list of entities, communities around us, utility companies, etc. And it's a 63-day holding period by state law. So at the end of 63 days, we'll website, and they're also posted on Facebook. So feel free to take a look at those. And we did add a category in there called significant undeveloped lots, SULs. And if you look at, I would ask you to look at that because it's something that we threw together, and it's in book 1. It identifies all the major undeveloped properties in the city. And it tries to identify maximum build out on those sites. And if you look at those, they're scattered through the city. But those tend to be the properties that will have the highest impact over the next 20 years. So we're trying to dial in a reasonable density if they're residential or if they're mixed use, so that we don't over-plan these properties. So if anything, we're dialing them down a little bit. But, you know, the densities are not 1 unit per acre in most cases. So it's a new category we put in there just to do some expectation management as sites that are vacant and 100 acres. We can try to align some expectations of what's going to be. So more on that, and I think that's about it.
Good, thank you.
That's a question. I had somebody comment,
And it's kind of over there.
that's really comment online that, we are having some accessibility issues with the master plan because it's not optimized for mobile or for the bad phone. And, you know, the library closed and stuff, they don't have, you know, access to the internet option, so I don't know, there's something, I don't know what we do about that, but I know that there's, people are concerned about that, so.
Okay. I'll get with Kendra and see what we can do to optimize that. The files are large.
Yeah, that's what,
And the first book is like 47 megs because they're so illustrated.
sure.
But I will get with Kendra and see what we can do to improve accessibility.
Good, thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you. A couple things. As Frank mentioned, we opened today to the public. So far, so good. We had some public coming in, trickle here and there, and I think the clerk's office down their end of the building had a few residents coming in as well. I think most people have been abiding by the recommendation to wear a mask or requirement to wear a mask in the building. You can see if you've been around City Hall, we installed plexiglass and signage and all that, but we comply with all the requirements. So, most of our time at staff has been trying to make sure we're in a safe space to open up and staff appropriately. As I mentioned in some of my updates I've been sending out at the end of the week, so we've had some staffing changes around City Hall, so we're addressing some of those responsibilities amongst other staff, and then we're in the midst of, before COVID hit, we were in the midst of looking for a couple of positions to fill, a deputy treasurer and a HR assistant, and now we have a communications manager, and we just almost have a battalion chief on board. We're pretty close, but the COVID really slowed things down in the hiring process, so we're revamping up on that. So Shannon is swamped, and it'll be good to have some assistance as we move forward. So we're just on the seat of our pants making things work, but things are going well. So compliments to our staff and all our departments for kicking in this and working from home and still being as efficient and effective as we can. So things are good on that level. We're back to resuming our weekly department head staff meetings in person. We're meeting in this room, so we're working on how we're going to communicate some of those issues. You all receive monthly staff reports from the departments, which I think are very comprehensive and really cover the weekly matters. So I'm not certain that we're going to be sending it out in that format. I mean, we're going to continue to do that, but sending the weekly updates out that we send to everyone, because we're going to focus those comments on 1 or 2 bullet points of what those departments are working on, and those will be summarized in the monthly reports. So I want to bombard you with all those things. Obviously, if there's a big issue, we're going to update you on that. But again, it's part of the retooling of some of our staffing assignments internally, so we will more to follow on that. We're kind of working through that. So other than that, things are going well, and so far, so good. We hope to, we did open the parks today and the park restrooms today as well. We are, at this point, probably going to have an adult softball league where we've got teams that are interested in that, and we feel we can do that safely. We have staff that can run those and umpires that will be able to umpire those, and I think we have, Sharon or Michelle said 19 teams that would still like to play. So it might be a shortened season, abbreviated season, but we're hoping to at least pull that off. Ice and Fitness Center, we're still working on plans of what that may look like whenever we get to open that, probably within the next couple of weeks, but it'll be very probably limited as far as showers, saunas, steam same with the ice side. So we want to open that as soon as we can, but we want to make sure it's reasonable and effective as well. So, a lot going on. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Third ward, we'll start Commissioner Heisinger.
We had a community engagement meeting right before this meeting tonight. Look for details about different events that we possibly have coming up in the fall. Wintertime.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Grovers?
I just had a question about the pickleball hours. I don't know if anybody else thought that, I guess I'd like to know why that happened, and just state that I think starting at 8 o'clock in the morning is a little late. A lot of people like to start early.
So, great question. The typical distance from a pickleball court is supposed to be about 500 to 600 feet in a residential area. The first house on the end, which that resident has become a very strong acquaintance, and we text or call on a daily basis, is 153 feet away from the pickleball court. And players, because other municipalities have closed their courts, we're getting players from all over the area, from Ottawa County. Muskegon County was a couple that I spoke with. They come in and they start a little after 6 o'clock in the morning. So you have actually, I believe it is, I think I sent that map. I want to say there's 4 or 5 houses within 300 feet. So this was not really well thought out with the noise piece. So the discussion that we had at this point was limit the hours to 8 to 8. We created a issue that didn't exist prior to. Spoke with all the neighbors, and actually have had multiple conversations, as Daryl and Frank know. I've been out there probably a good 3-4 nights at 9:30 at night, and speaking with people coming off, and everybody's been extremely workable with this. I think this will help with Grand Rapids opening up their courts. There's been a large portion of people coming out here to play, and it's an interesting conundrum, because you want people exercising and partaking, but yet too there's it's a very peaceful, very tranquil, and just a perfect neighborhood back there. And all of a sudden you're hearing the smack of a hard ball on a hard wooden paddle. So 8 to 8 was it. I've got a feeling that beyond this, it's going to be solved with people playing elsewhere, and the restriction on the hours for now. And again, we've had no complaints since the hours. Everybody's actually been very workable with, and they respect the neighbors back in there.
What was the cost to convert those?
About 10,000 roughly.
Close to 20,000 by the time you do the nets and the
Yeah.
painting and the resurfacing.
And that's still on those?
Four courts. 1 tennis court converts to 4 pickleball courts.
Okay.
And then there is potential.
Now that we have our agreement with Kenowa worked out on the property here at City Central Park, there's some old tennis courts that you maybe know at the back by Central Elementary, which was one of the areas that the pickleball group had mentioned at the time when they made their presentation to the city. So I think that's something that we should look at some point in the future when funding permits. And I think now that we have the lease arranged, I think Kenowa is fine with that. But it's taking away tennis as well. So
Right.
there's a cost to that, and maybe there's some way to do that. But we have some residences over there too. There's some condos and apartments that. But that was one location that the pickleball group had actually recommended, because there were 4 courts and you could get probably some very good. Yeah.
I think
When
that
we know that it would be so loud and offensive to the neighbors when we approved the concept of trying to help everybody, but it is, and we're trying to deal with it.
and the amount of people I think coming have really exacerbated I mean, it's full. It's great to see people are out doing, and again, we talked with the county health department throughout, and they encourage us to keep the playgrounds, the courts, everything open, respect the social distancing. I feel like people have done a really good job with that, but it was just a point here of when you start measuring how close they are to the house, and I'm sitting out there the one night at the closest house. It's close to 10 o'clock at night, and you hear the smack, smack, smack. It's just like, if this were my place, if I'm walking in their shoes, that's not something I'd be accepting of. So city's done a great job quickly adapting. Maybe even looking at potential of some noise abatement material on the fence, but I don't know, that can be rather costly too. So we're taking steps here to see if we slow it down. So Great question, thank you.
Thank you.
Second ward.
Oh, I don't really have anything.
Okay.
Enjoying had a lot of great conversations recently with, various residents of the second ward and some of the other areas as well, so, starting to ask some questions, regarding all the things that are going on around here, better understand how we're doing things in the city, so just gonna keep plugging away at that and see if we can get some answers from people and.
Good, thank you. Commissioner DeShane?
How are we coming along on the battalion chief? Is that almost done?
On the what?
Battalion Chief.
Oh, yeah, as I mentioned before, we have made a conditional offer and we're 3 close. We're just waiting to check probably the last 2 boxes we did.
Yep.
Yep,
Good, that's something I'm excited to learn about.
Save
And
and
then I
speed.
just have to say thank you to Dan for taking one of our residents' calls. I guess they thought he was a drain commissioner. Get in there. I think I'm all set.
Mr. Kent, Commissioner Kent?
Well, Waldorf's doing well with the traffic, a lot more trucks go down the street and thing, with the heat and everything, and that cable wire probably got more due to the heat. Neighbors, I don't know when he can get his cable hooked up like that, but spoke with Frank on that, and so, but no, it's, doing well. So, other than that, got a call asking about fire pits, and I'll bug Dave on that, but, so, we'll get a little more update, but, no, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gilbert?
I don't have much. I guess the only thing that I would bring up is that I know that I have been working with Frank and the mayor pretty closely on on some amendments to help our restaurant industry in the city of Walker. That's something that was brought up at one of our meetings prior, and it's something that had been in the works for a little while at that point. But I think we're taking that to public hearing for the planning commission in short order, and then we'll be seeing that at some point here. So thought I'd give an update on that, and I'm sure I've been bugging all of our city staff, and there are plenty lately, so
No,
I'll
it's
leave
great.
it at that.
Great, no, great questions, and I, knowing we don't have, any action legislation taking place yet that's allowing the outdoor piece, and sitting on the, Liquor Control Commission, conference call the other day, definitely, there's a lot of complexities with this. I don't think there's a easy answer to this, to help the restaurants out and work within the laws. And there's some valid concerns the LCC has, and there's also, some rigidity in there for reasons, so I get it. So we'll work through it, so. All right. I have 7 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call our city commission meeting to order. I'll deliver the invocation this evening. I'd ask if you please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we gather before you this evening, always grateful for the life and opportunities you have blessed us with. Tonight we continue to pray for the healing in our nation and continue to ask for your help and guidance, ensuring all voices are heard. We give special thanks as always for our military, police, fire, as well as our city staff who have tirelessly worked to help keep us safe and healthy. All of these things we give thanks and ask for continued strength in guiding us to do your will. Amen. I'd like to ask you to stand and join me to pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If I could please ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Carey,
Present.
Commissioner Gilbert,
Present.
Commissioner Kent,
President.
Commissioner DeShane,
Present.
Commissioner Glanville,
Present.
Commissioner Heisiga,
Present.
and Commissioner Groders. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will entertain a motion if there's not discussion on the commission meetings. I did catch one thing, and I'm sorry I didn't catch it earlier. There was one, it was on the committee of the whole meeting, Zoom call is done, but most of city commission is present. I think when we called roll, everybody was here. I mean, I don't think anybody was not here, was it? Okay, so I think just with that clarification, so if we are good with that, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes.
I'll make a motion.
Motion from Commissioner Heisinger. Support Commissioner DeSheen. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, commission meeting minutes are approved. We now are holding a public hearing on the subject of the 2020-2021 fiscal year budget. Anyone wishing to speak on this subject and that subject alone should raise their hand or come forward and be recognized to speak. Hearing no public comments, the public hearing is now closed. Next on the agenda is public comment on agenda items. Is there any comment from the public? Agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move forward. On the consent agenda, we have two items: expenditures in the amount of $1.032,289.26, and the other is the PCI contract approval, the renewal for the contract that we discussed in the committee of the whole meeting. Are there any questions on other items, either one of those items? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion.
Motion from Commissioner Kent.
Consent agenda.
Support. I didn't hear who was down. Okay. Commissioner Groders, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Consent agenda's pass. Next on our list is Resolution 20-563, and this is the City of Walker Precinct 6 permanent relocation. This is moving Precinct 6 for the reasons our clerk shared with us in the committee of the whole meeting from Walker Meadows to Mount Olive Church at Leonard and Kinney. Any other question or dialogue around this? I'll entertain a motion for approval then. Motion from Commissioner Glanville. Support?
I'll support.
Support from Commissioner Shane. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Resolution 20-563 is passed. Next on the list is Resolution 20-564, 2020-2021 fiscal year budget approval. Before we look for a motion, we'll turn the floor over to you, Mr. DeVries.
Okay, thank you. So, I know we have seen the spreadsheet that I sent out, which is very detailed, you know, lots of lines, lots of numbers, and so I wanted to spend a few minutes going through a PowerPoint, just trying to pull out some of the stuff that's in there and trying to make it a little more understandable, hopefully, or digestible at least. So yeah, I wanted just to kind of go over what we used in preparing the budget this year. We used priorities that were established by the Walker City Commission through strategic planning. We had a lot of open and honest communication through department heads, management, finance, the Walker Finance Committee, and the City Commission. Lots of discussions with the Walker staff, you know, a lot of engineering, DPW, fire, police discussions. We also have our 5-year CIP, or capital improvement plan. I did not provide a copy for that, but I can if you are interested in seeing it at some point. It's just kind of a guideline that we use thinking forward for the larger expenditures for vehicles and equipment, building maintenance items, those types of things. State website for revenue projections. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple slides, but and other information that came up. This slide is very similar to one I used last year, but it's basically, those are the sources that we use when we're preparing the budget. So, this year, the timeline, I wanted to just kind of walk through really quick, just to kind of remind everybody, which you probably don't need, but just felt the need just to go back. So we did the initial draft budget and submitted it to the Finance Committee on February 14. That's what we need to do per our charter. We had good discussion. Budget looked pretty good at that point. Then the middle slide happened, COVID and all of its interesting effects. that happened very quickly and continue to go on. So we basically reworked the whole budget that we had from February 14. Did a lot of revisions and a lot of rediscussions with departments and with the finance committee. The finance committee then looked at it again on May 8th and reviewed it and recommended that we move forward. So that was a document that was sent out in your agenda packet. So, but not been a typical year that way. So I'm sure that's an understatement of the night. So, so with the budget, we're trying to reflect the goals and priorities identified by the city commission. We're trying to continue to provide quality services and programs in the most efficient and cost-effective manner. From a revenue standpoint, on an overall basis, these are based on our best understanding of the impacts of COVID-19 and also the stay-home, stay-safe orders from the state of Michigan. Unfortunately, that true impact of how that's going to impact our revenues won't be known for quite some time. I mean, it will. We're 1 month away from the end of this fiscal year, but we're going to be dealing with this for quite some time, obviously, just as everybody else is. So we're not exempt from that. The expenditures have been trimmed back from our initial proposed budget from the February version. Our priorities, projects, and equipment needs were reevaluated and adjusted accordingly, basically bringing things back down to get more in line with the revenue projections that we were able to come up with. So, and I just wanted to point out that, obviously this is a very fluid nature that we're in right now with the current events. So we're going to be, not that we don't monitor it already, but we will be watching it a lot closer this year and be more apt to be ready to bring proposals of amendments to you as we see fit. Hopefully we have a budget that's not too far off, but if things look like they're going sideways really quick, we're going to be quick to get to the commission with recommendations and let you decide what way you want to go. So.
Dan, before you go on, just to make one comment on this too, as far as the third bullet point there, with the extension of the income tax deadline to July 31st, that really complicates our projections going into the final year because we're not closing out our current fiscal year. So that's kind of lagging a month behind. So this is our best conservative estimate that we've taken with this budget based upon what we think are solid numbers, but we really won't know for really another 2 months before we get those numbers approved. So.
Correct.
And you've seen that previously where we've lowered our expectations on income tax revenue for the next 2 years based on that, but we just really don't have any idea. I think we'll hit our targets, but we just, again, we'll keep you posted on that. And I think we're in good shape, but we just don't know for sure yet.
Thanks. Yeah, Daryl and I both had conversations with Julie Block on different occasions, and she's just uncomfortable, and rightfully so, of being able to give any kind of good projection at this point. So, yeah, good. Okay. So then just a little quick reminder about how our revenues work. We have the 3 main sources of revenue: property tax. We continue to have a millage rate of 1.336 mills. Again, it's an extremely low operating millage rate, and we have not changed that since 2000, so that's pretty good. The second bullet point is the Walker income tax. It ties into what Daryl was just talking about. Initially, when we were doing amendments for the year we're currently in, we were initially talking about trying to increase it from our 12 million. Realized that with all the COVID stuff going on, that would not be a wise move. So we remained at 12 million, and again, we're going to, on our 2021 budget, stay at the 12 million mark. Keep our eyes watched on that, and if something changes, we will come with an amendment. But just for comparison, the fiscal year of 18-19, we were at 13.2 million. So we're projecting a million decrease in each one. There's a slide a little bit later that will show some of the income tax trends, but just want to point that part out. Maybe the third part is the state revenue sharing and the Act 51 revenues. The Act 51, again, are the road funds that come from the state from the gas tax. We put our estimates in for that this year based on both the state revenue projections that the state put out in May, but also then some internal estimates. We didn't go exactly with what the state said. We kind of made a few adjustments internally, trying again to be on the conservative side. So that's kind of how the revenues pan out. Here's kind of a list of some of the next few slides are basically expenditure related. A 2% COLA across the board. We had to put some money in for the payroll specialists that we talked about, and the challenge chief, we just talked about those two. So we have a full year budgeted now in this 2021 budget, where the prior year was a partial year. We're going to continue to make our commitments that we want to make additional contributions to the pension liability and also to the OPEB set aside. We have some HVAC and some upgrades for 2 fire stations for number 2 and number 3. A bunch of parking lot repairs that Gary Postma had identified citywide. We have some park improvements for $100,000 that are budgeted in there. We have some projects that we would like to do, but it's also flexible money within that park that if something else comes up that would make more sense in the park, we could do that. One of them is the roof for the concession building, so that's $40,000 of that, but then there's other park improvements in there as well. The last bullet point is a Zamboni for the Ice and Fitness Center. Again, this might sound like a bad time to be trying to do that. The 2 things that we know about the Zamboni is it's getting old, showing its age, and needing a lot of repair. The second part is we've been setting money aside to replace it, so it would not come out of operating costs if we go ahead with that. It would be completely out of set-aside money that we have in the bank ready to go. Right now we're at about around $200,000 already as a set-aside. So that if that stuck out to somebody, that's kind of the reason why it's there. It's not going to be operating related money coming out. So from the road perspective, every year we do overlays. The last few years it's been around $1 million between local and major. This year we pulled it back to $400,000 each, or $800,000 throughout the budget. We also have multiple large road construction projects that I know you're all aware of going on now or shortly that are about $5.5 million. And I've listed them out below, the main 4 ones, but below at the very bottom you'll see that we're getting approximately $3.3 million in grant revenues that will go against that $5.5 million in expenditures. So this slide is basically showing from our capital improvement plan or CIP plan what we are intending to buy in terms of vehicles, equipment, that type of thing. Some of the bigger ones are a single axle dump truck for the DPW to replace one that's getting old. That's $235,000. Some other trucks in there. We'll be replacing 2 police cruisers as we do each year. This year's amount looks higher than the ones in the past, but my understanding is that they're changing models of the Chevy Tahoes, which means that the equipment we have doesn't fit in there quite correctly, so they need to get new stuff to put in there that will fit that particular model. So that's why it might be a little bit higher than what you're used to seeing in years past. We have 18 new AED units listed on there. Now, we currently have several different AED units throughout the city of various ages and various brands. So, what we're trying to do is get rid of all the older stuff that they're having a harder time keeping up with and finding parts in that, and we can start just clean, fresh. Everybody's got the same thing, so we can all get the same parts. There'll be gas flow is like Keith Mankle or that. He'll be happy to tell you why what we currently have is just kind of not working that well anymore. So the other part, the second to the, or third from the bottom, the fire turnout gear for $70,000. The intent now is we would like to have on a rotating basis that every year we would buy 20 sets of new turnout gear for the firefighters. And by doing so, over the course of 10 years, each firefighter would have received two new sets of turnout gear within that time frame. So instead of trying to have to buy a whole group at one time, like we're doing with the AEDs, we want to try to start doing this on a consistent basis. So that'll be something you'll see going forward.
Dan, can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
What exactly is turnout gear?
It's the coats and the pants and the, the fire stuff when they go out to a scene, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you get that right, Chief?
Yep.
He's our honorary firefighter. That's it.
So, I don't know if there's anything on that specific list that you want to speak to right now, or we can come back to it later. I won't belabor the point, but those are the main things on there for that. In the last year or two, we've been trying really hard to talk more about set-aside accounts or funds, rainy day funds, whatever you want to call it, sinking funds, that type of thing. So the budget that's proposed would have $25,000 that would be added to the facilities sinking fund. So we'd have about $427,000 at this time next year. I'd like to add another $100,000 to the OPEB set-aside fund, which would get us to about $480,000. And then we'd add $50,000 to the fitness capital improvement set aside, so we'd be around $200,000. And then this is an account where we would take the money out of to pay for the new Zamboni. So that $200,000 would be the remaining once we, after we're done purchasing the Zamboni. So that fund's been there a long time, and we finally accumulated a little bit for that. One thing I would like to just point out when we talk about the OPEB set aside too, we also have an OPEB trust fund where we have over $1 million set aside for OPEB related items. It's very stringent as to what we can do with that. A couple years ago we started this OPEB set aside, which gives us a little more flexibility. And the best way to describe it is a few years ago we were able to buy out a group of employees out of that account and get them switched out of our OPEB liability that way. And we couldn't do it by the trust account. With the trust account, we weren't able to utilize that money for that purpose. So this is why we have this money for the same purpose, but it's a little more flexible in how we can utilize it. So I'm sure you've heard me talk about transfers from the general fund many times, but this bottom section just kind of spells out what we've got listed in the current proposed budget. Those numbers are fairly in line with what we typically do. The 1.15 for Major Street, we're usually between $1 million and $1.5 million on an annual basis. Local streets, the 350, that's between 3 and 4 every year. The one for ice and fitness is up. Typically it's $100,000. This year it's going to be $200,000, so 150 of it would be used for operating purposes, and the other would be for the capital set aside. There's that. And then those bottom two are just kind of a repeat of what's above. From the bond and debt payment, no new bond debt is incurred in this budget. General and major and local streets are all continue to be bond free, which is great. We did approve the purchase of the aerial platform truck, the 3-year IPA or installment purchase agreement for just under $1.2 million. Our payment for the budget coming up would be about $405,000. Outside of that, our DDA has one bond left for fire station number 2. up in a couple of years, and we have about 558,000 left on that. And again, the note on there says that the DDA's bonds are paid for by DDA captured property tax, so there's no impact on the general fund whatsoever on that. And then finally was the River Bend water main bond. Again, a couple more years left on that. It's paid through special assessments to the property owners who receive benefit of that water main, and we're about 188,000 left on that bond. So looking good that way.
Hey, Dan, one comment on the platform truck, just a reminder, everybody, that the 405,000 that we have payment, we already have 300,000 sitting in a CD account.
Correct.
Accruing some interest for the city,
Yes.
so
Yep.
a large chunk of that is already 75%, a little above, is already there, cash in hand.
That's
So I think
correct.
that's why we felt more comfortable making that decision when we did.
Yeah, good point, thank you. Now, we just want to focus just a little bit on the general fund. Again, the general fund is the main fund for the city. Its purpose is to account for all activities that are not required to be in a different fund. Our main revenue sources, we've talked about those, but those are the percentages. So income tax is 67% of our total revenue. State revenue sharing is about 12, and property tax is about 9. So that's, I think I added up to 88 to 90% of our total revenues are right there. So next, I'd just like to share a couple slides. These are based on the proposed budget. We have budgeted revenues of $17.8 million. You can see by the graph, again, that income tax is by far the large portion. State revenue sharing, property taxes, and then, you know, a few other items on there too. But just kind of visually gives you an idea of what, you know, how our revenues are split out. Did the same thing with the expenditures, $18.9 million. Again, in a graph form, the police in the middle is obviously the highest, fire is right next to it. If you go way to the right, OPEB and pension liability